Hello, Kim Searle, Emotional Mastery here. I've been talking about parenting in a recent newsletter I sent out because I had a client who came to see me, and she'd come because she was a busy professional working her little socks off to maintain this facade, if you like, of being in control. But the problem was she didn't feel in control. She had issues with her workload and was constantly feeling under pressure. It's common, very common. But the pressure was caused by deadlines, the quality of her work. It was really becoming quite difficult, and it had knocked her self-confidence and her self-worth. Now, whilst she'd come to me about work, it was actually manifesting in other areas of her life too, just not quite so obvious. So as I started to talk to her about what was going on and how that affected her and how that made her feel, we finally got to the point where it was clear that the driving factor for the fact that she was struggling with workload and feeling under pressure by deadlines with this idea of being perfect. Is that something you can identify with? I know at times that can be me, particularly when I'm writing my articles. It's never quite right. And I can rewrite something more times than I care to mention. So perfectionism was underpinning the fact that she was struggling with her workload, because what was happening was she was doing the work, but revisiting it, checking it, validating it. So she was revisiting the same piece of work at least 2 or 3 times. And of course, what that meant was it was taking her longer to complete her day work. As I asked her a little bit more about this perfectionism and where that came from, she happened to mention that it was probably as a child she found that she had an overbearing father. Now, I want to be very clear here. When I'm working with clients, there is always a protagonist, if you like, a villain of the piece. But I'm going to explain to you why they may well be in the eyes of yourself. There may be something else going on. So she had an overbearing father. He was not somebody who was emotionally demonstrative. In fact, she didn't very often see him even smile or laugh. So it was a very austere upbringing. And to boot, he was verbally quite aggressive with her. And she lived, as she said, terrified most of the time that she might do the wrong thing, say the wrong thing, be the wrong thing, be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And it was really, really hard. Now, for many people, that could be classed as a form of abuse, or just that he was just that very, very austere. But let me explain something before I explain how I helped the client. The three things that I want you to know about your parents is that your parents were adults, first and foremost. And as adults, they were flawed. But as children, our parents are almost up on that pedestal, aren't they, for our very early childhood? They are everything. No matter what they say or do, they cannot do wrong. It's only as we get older do we spot the signs. The second thing I want you to know is your parents were doing the best they could with what they knew right then. And if they had known better, or if they'd had some extra help, they would have done better. So they would have been flawed adults who brought all those flaws with them into parenthood. And I don't know whether you're parents yourselves, but if you are, you will know that you've either rebelled against the way you were brought up or you've mirrored it. Either way, your experience of being parented has influenced your ways of being a parent today. And I think the third And most important thing I want you to know is that parent who was an adult was a child just like you. Let that sink in for a moment. They were also a child just like you. And something has gone on to make them the person that they were, whether that's good or bad. But it's really worth knowing, because just sometimes, particularly with people who've had very difficult experiences as children, this isn't about forgiving them. That's not about it, but it's about having some form of compassion about where they've come from. And let me tell you, if you're trying to be the perfect parent, you're on a hiding to nothing. Years ago, when I was learning counselling, one of the first exercises we did was, what is a good parent? And of course, the natural thing came up is somebody who's perfect and does everything, exactly the right way. What do you think the outcome is for that child? You're setting standards that potentially they can't meet. I have seen people who have not got into relationships because their mum and dad were just perfect together. And if they have got into relationships, they've managed to somehow break them up or find that they're not good enough and walked away because they can't meet the standards of their parents. So there is no one size fits all. And if you're a parent, you are also doing the best you can. So it's a bit of a cycle. And I think this is important to note. All we can do is the best we can. And I very often talk to my clients about doing whatever they can. And as long as they're doing it with love, kindness, and a good intent, then they're doing a really good job. They're doing better than perhaps they think they are. So I'm not asking you in this video to forgive your parents for whatever they may have done or not done. I'm not asking you to suddenly, change your view of them. What I am asking you to do, first and foremost, is to have compassion for their inner child who was wounded in some way, who didn't have their needs met. And unfortunately, we're only now beginning to recognize the true value of mental health. And I work at the emotional health level. This is to come. You will find this becoming louder and louder as we move forward, this emotional health that is so important. Children being allowed to be children. It's about compassion. So what did I do with this client who came to see me? So it was about helping her to heal. There's nothing we could do about the father per se. There is, but not in this particular session. What I needed was her to help her inner child get the things that she needed by being it for her in her mind's eye. Because if you can reframe it in the mind somehow, the emotional content can just wash away. She managed to move from almost being terrified to being neutral about it. And yes, I think even to the point where she was able to forgive him, knowing what she knew about him, knowing his background as a child. And there was an element of compassion, and that compassion could lead her to the forgiveness she needed to give him. But more importantly, that young child who felt terrified all of her life could start to realize she didn't need to feel terrified anymore. She could begin to grow and develop, knowing that she had the older version, the clients at her current age, with her at all times. And whilst I'm not saying everything was perfect afterwards, she did find she was managing her workloads much easier. She was not spending so much time checking and rechecking. And she actually wrote to me and said how really pleased she was that things were so much easier. And let me tell you, she did some other work, and that made the difference too. So, talking about parents today, I want you to know that the three things that you need to remember about parents is that they were adults first, that they were doing the best they could with what they knew, and that they were children once too, who were parented. And if you're a parent, I want you to know this too, so that you can just ease the guilt that you are probably accruing, if not now, then for later. It's not serving you. Just let it go. Well, I hope that was useful for you. My name is Kim Searle, Emotional Mastery. Please do reach out if you have a relationship with a parent that could do with a little bit of healing. Thank you very much.